Hello, Chantel. Welcome.
Hello, everybody.
Hey.
Hey.
Welcome, Manjusha.
Hello.
Hello.
Guy. Hi, Ratna, Job, Chantel.
Hey, Manjusha.
Oh, there's everyone. Hello. I'm sorry to him.
Super. So, Guy, I think that's everyone who is supposed to be attending today.
Excellent.
So
Excellent. Let's start because it is a busy agenda, you may have seen. And we really hope to have a lot of time to answer any questions or provide guidance. So once again, welcome to all. Good day, good afternoon, good morning. I'm really delighted to welcome all of you to the first steering group meeting of the NCD Lab on people living with NCDs. Very important initiative. But an important initiative because the GCM has been working on this work stream for some time and partnering with great partners during this time. So it's a pleasure to see some of those familiar faces and friendly faces on the screen, but also really excited to welcome some of the new partners that have joined this initiative in particular. Special acknowledgement to our long-standing and fruitful partnership with NCD Alliance, who will be your very able co-chair, and through Manjusha and team. You may have noticed a lot of activity in the last few days, weeks, but I can assure you that this has been a very long strategic collaboration with Manjusha and the team at NCD Alliance for a bit more than a year, I suppose, really structuring a very solid, sustainable initiative that really has the impact we had in our initial vision when we started this discussion. So first of all, let me land on a few in the introduction on a bit of why we're all together. What are we looking for? And I'll start with some of the hard facts, which are always give us some of a reality check. The 2020 global health estimates have recently exposed that 7 out of the 10 leading causes of death are now NCDs, compared to 40 out of 10 just 20 years ago. The epidemiological transition is really overwhelming towards the NCDs. NCDs, mental health conditions, and substance abuse disorders are now the leading causes of mortality and morbidity for women globally. COVID-19 has exposed the extreme vulnerability of people living with NCDs, as they are not only more vulnerable to comorbidities and exposed to disruption of health services, but also more likely to develop serious illness, potentially leading to mortality. With these numbers in mind, it's also concerning to know that only 17 of the 194 WHO member states, that's only 8% of our countries, are on track to meet SDG 3.4 to reduce premature mortality by 1/3 and promote mental health and well-being by 2030. The rapidly increasing number of people living with or affected by NCDs and the dwindling progress in reducing their premature mortality has drained or is draining, very much so, draining resources, undermining trust in institutions, and exacerbating inequalities. The deadly interplay between COVID and NCDs has dramatically outlined the critical juncture we now face to build back better but healthier. We must redouble our collective efforts to stamp out this affront to public health and socioeconomic development. The UN Secretary General, in a very timely manner, has called on all sectors of society to mobilize for a decade of action on the SDGs at 3 levels, calling for global action, also local action, but more importantly, people action, including by people living with diseases and lived experiences, women, youth, civil society organizations, the private sector, academia, and other stakeholders to generate an unstoppable movement pushing for the required transformations. Together with you, we are responding to the need to co-create that required transformation. The vision of the NCD Lab on people living with NCDs is to promote an understanding of the ways in which lived experience can and are being meaningfully involved across various sectors, including government, intergovernmental organizations, and the civil society. Through our work, we will recognize and prioritize the value of community-led and locally driven projects that are led by lived experience. So how are we going to do this? If we go to the first slide, Jack, and probably the next slide, I've touched on some of these elements today already. Also, the vision of the NCD Labs in general across the 3 thematic areas we are launching, and we will touch on those 3 thematic areas shortly. The vision of the NCD Labs itself is to harness the power of multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder collaboration and maintain and enhance and catalyze its ethos of innovation, both in principle and practice. And we hope to propel global development and the SDGs by supporting these dynamic, innovative initiatives that address NCDs, their risk factors, and determinants. Very importantly, next slide, please. We are building on several key elements. And the basic deliverable of the NCD Labs is submissions of innovative solutions that support the agenda and targeting all levels, policy level change, systems change, or individual change. The labs will build on active, diverse, multi-stakeholder networks created not only through the GCM, but also through your own networks. We count very much on expanding and leveraging your own networks. And this is very much building on the GCM's long-standing multi-stakeholder environment and community, which we have implemented and inserted into all of our activities. And then NCD Labs initiative is particularly building on the GCM communities, our platform of communities of practice, where we had healthy environments, healthy communities across different thematic areas. There we did had a very successful community on people living with, and together with Manjusha and NCDA, we have been discussing how to then evolve that community into this model, the NCD model, where it's much more focused, innovative, results-oriented, project-oriented, and hopefully has a very much more targeted impact on the SDG, NCD-related SDGs. And we will also, at the last point, provide a dedicated space for stakeholders across different areas, across different systems and communities to really have an opportunity to provide innovative projects. We are really looking for way beyond NCD and WHO and its traditional partners, and looking for those community grassroots innovative solutions that can really connect global policy into local implementation. Next slide, please. And we were discussing the 3 thematic areas we are initiating with. The NC Labs will focus on 3 specific game changers that the GCM community has particular expertise on and networks on. One is women and girls in relation to NCDs, next generation, youth and NCDs, and the current one, which is people living with NCDs, critical the lived experience. We will add additional thematic areas as we move forward, and we will maybe build on your own expertise, insights, and perspectives on which of those other thematic areas or proposals for thematic areas could be the next group of game changers that we can insert into this NCD lab model. Next slide, please. And I'll give over the floor to Jack within the team, but also to your co-chair, Manjusha, to lead you on to sort of the processes and roles and responsibilities of the NCD lab. So to you, thank you.
Thank you very much, Guy, and welcome to everyone. I want to echo the excitement and positivity mentioned by Guy, and also thank you for your patience and responsiveness over the last week to 10 days. I know there's lots of emails back and forth and lots of requirements, but we really appreciate your interest and your support in completing those processes. So we're very, very honored and very pleased to confirm yourselves as steering group members. And as Guy mentioned, that's really one of the elements alongside the co-chair, which really make this particular new platform have a really core strength. You know, the ability to bring in your expertise, your insights, but also potentially leverage your networks in supporting what eventually will be a portfolio of winners and really innovative projects through the labs. So that's really particularly exciting. I should also mention that there's also a great opportunity to connect this agenda, not only with the other thematic areas, which we will explore in future cycles, but also with a number of different initiatives and activities ongoing. And as Guy mentioned, we have been building upon our own internal portfolio of activities linked to lived experiences for a number of years. Most recently, we had the WHO informal consultation on people living with NCDs in December. We're going to have another consultation in March, focusing on those lived experiences in relation to diabetes and how that can feed into the new WHO Global Compact, Global Diabetes Compact, which is led by the NCD department. So this is a really key strategic area that we're hoping to expand on, and the labs will very much support that. But we've also had great support from many of you as part of those activities to date, and also including NCD Alliance, who arguably have been the driving force from civil society and the key catalyst to really making this move from being an emerging topic from civil society to really being a key pillar going forward. So it gives us great pleasure to introduce Manjusha as part of NCD Alliance to give a bit of overview of the work they do and also the different roles and responsibilities going forward. Manjusha, over to you.
Thanks so much, Jack, for the really generous introduction, and welcome everybody to today's call. We were all really looking forward to it. And as Jack and Guy mentioned, really thanks for your patience with all the back and forth over the last few days. I guess to begin, I think that the most important thing to say is that the NCD lab, the launch of this particular NCD lab comes at a very timely moment, obviously with COVID-19 being a wake-up call. We've all sort of been very encouraged by WHO's leadership, in particular in sort of recognizing the value of involving communities and people living with NCDs in the NCD response and ensuring that we see progress on NCD-related action. The NCD movement, in a sense, is a relatively young movement. It's just over a decade old, but in the early years, we have seen an absence, a clear absence of voices of communities and people living with NCDs, particularly from the policy discussions and policy-making processes. And I would probably say that in the last couple of years, particularly, it seems like the tide is turning. In 2018, with the UN high-level meeting on NCDs and the outcome of that, the political declaration on NCDs that was committed to by all member states, we saw clear recognition of the role and value of people living with NCDs and civil society. And since then, over the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen this growing recognition and acknowledgement for meaningful involvement of people living with NCDs. And of course, with the pandemic last year, it's really been an amplifier in recognizing and seeing how we can catalyze efforts to walk the talk now and really operationalize meaningful involvement of people living with NCDs. And for that reason, this NCD lab comes at a very timely moment. From the perspective of the NCD Alliance, we're of course committed to promoting meaningful involvement of people living with NCDs through the Our Views, Our Voices initiative that some of you might be familiar with. I'm so glad to see some members of the Our Views, Our Voices advisory committee here as part of this steering group. The initiative also quite a young initiative. It's guided by our advisory committee that is comprised of people who bring lived experiences, bring their expertise to really provide strategic direction to the initiative. The initiative in itself is dedicated to advocating and promoting for meaningful involvement of people living with NCDs, particularly in decision-making processes. It also looks to equip people living with NCDs with skills, knowledge, and confidence to share their lived experiences publicly and call for change. And also a very key pillar of the initiative is consulting with the cross-section of people living with a wide range of NCDs on their needs, challenges and priorities of navigating health systems dealing with stigma and discrimination. And I'm happy to share more details about the initiative, but just to close, the initiative is sort of pivoted on what we call the advocacy agenda of people living with NCDs. Very powerful, compelling document. It's an advocacy tool built with inputs from 2,000 people living with NCDs from different parts of the world, and really acts as a compass for NCD civil society to call for change and meaningful involvement. So I'll stop with that. And Jack, over to you for the next. Okay. Perhaps I can continue, Jack, before handing over to you. I think we must start with an introduction to all the steering group members here. And just recently, I learned of the popcorn method, which is essentially, one person introducing themselves and picking somebody, from the list to then introduce themselves and sort of passing on the baton. Didn't know it was called the popcorn method, but it is. So if I could perhaps start and call upon Alex to introduce, and then pass it on to another member of the steering group to introduce themselves. It would be fantastic to have a very brief background of your organizational affiliation, your interest in this particular NCD lab. So over to you, Alex.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Hi, so my name is Alex Kwok. I'm based in Vancouver, Canada, and I currently work as a research assistant for Arthritis Research Canada. And so our organization, we work closely with people with arthritis. We have a patient advisory board that we consult with regularly on from research inception all the way down to our research translation. So translating our research to people, our target audience, which is people with arthritis. And so I'm very excited to be part of the steering committee member and kind of bring my expertise with working with people with arthritis and also interacting with people with arthritis through programs that I'm a part of. Yeah, so that's my introduction. Thank you.
If you'd like to pick somebody, Alex.
Oh yeah, I'll go down the list. Bruno Hellman.
So thank you very much. For me, it's a great pleasure to join the steering group. I have been involved with diabetes advocacy and mental health advocacy for about 3 years now. I have experience from both civil society organizations, as I work for ACT Health Promotion, which represents the Brazilian NCD Alliance, which is affiliate with the NCD Alliance. I also have experience from the government aspect, as I was in charge of developing the advocacy plan for the NCD coordination. And now I'm part of IDF, the International Diabetes Federation, as a program coordinator. For me, it's an amazing opportunity to learn and share with so many familiar peers and also learn with the new ones. And I have been asking and kind of making a point that is important to bring to the institutional level the meaningful involvement of people living with. So seeing like so many movements and so many action taking place from like GCM in partnership with always with NCD Alliance, it means a lot to me. So I'm happy to be here and looking forward to work with all of you. So I would like to call one of my mentors and one of the persons in charge of introducing me to the NCD world. So please, Mark, over to you.
I was afraid that this would happen. Just kidding. So it's a pleasure to be here and to be part of this amazing steering committee with so good friends also here participating and new friends. I'm sure that also we'll know better each other very soon. So I'm Mark Baron. I'm based in Brazil. I've been working in the NCDs field for the past 20 years, initially in ADJ Diabetes Brazil, the largest diabetes association in Brazil, developing programs initially only in education, but also engaging in advocacy movement in Brazil towards coverage of care for people with diabetes, and then developing programs for empowering people with diabetes and under NCDs in Brazil, and collaborating also in programs abroad, and engaging later in research, in other researches and implementation of programs for improving prevention and treatment of individuals with NCDs, and always so trying to facilitate the participation and the engagement of people living with NCDs in the different aspects, from researches to programs to policies, etc., to make sure that they are kind of with their voices heard and actively participating. So a great pleasure to be here. I'm currently managing the Intersectoral Forum to Fight NCDs in Brazil, and Vice President of the International Diabetes Federation. Thank you. Oh, and I need to call someone, right? So since we call, some people, let me call, I would be able to call more than one now that I know, but I'll start by Kaisa, since she's the one who I know, who's right after Bruno in the list.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks. It's really great to be here. I know some of you before, and just basing it on that list, I'm very positive for this work that we're taking on, and I'm certain, looking at the list, that with everyone's competence and experience, this will be a wonderful experience, wonderful work. My name is Kaisa. It's a very tricky name. You don't have to learn it. I listen to anything that sounds remotely like it. I was born and raised in Sweden, and this is where I'm based again after living abroad for many years. I'm an advocate and public speaker, and also, as it says on the list, consultant occasionally. And I've been working within the NCD space for about 9 years. Sorry, my video is freezing, less flattering. I've been doing various work with mostly nonprofits. My most recent job was as president of the Swedish Diabetes Association, but I've been working a lot with international organizations as well. And Manjusha mentioned the Our Views, Our Voices initiative of the NCD Alliance. So I've been a part of that for the past almost 3 years. So that's been wonderful. And I'm lucky through that also to have had other opportunities. So working with the OECD and IDF as well, that Mark mentioned, that's where we met, and what's on the list as well, something called the Center for Person-Centered Care at the University of Gothenburg. So I'm very, very blessed to have done very, very exciting things, a lot of exciting things. And I'm currently, I should mention as well that I currently have an interim position with Medtronic, which is a medical device company. But I'm doing all my other things alongside that. I've been living with diabetes for 18 years, and about 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with brain cancer. And as a consequence of that, I'm living with various endocrine diseases. Brain cancer is no easy match, so it leaves its traces. And I think the reason why I wanted to get involved with this is just, everything I've done since I was diagnosed with diabetes, really, and everything I've done for the past 9 years in my work has always been about engaging, right? It's always been about engaging myself and by extension, other people living with NCD. So it just comes naturally to me. I think it's the only way forward. So I don't know if that's a great explanation, but that's the foundation of it. So I'm very happy to be here. And let me see, I'm gonna hand over to Liliana, if you would like to speak now.
Yeah, hello everybody. I will be translating what Liliana is going to tell you.
Hello. Bueno, mi nombre es Liliana Thierry. Yo soy directora y fundadora de la Asociación Cuidar de Diabetes. Estoy aquí porque, bueno, diagnosticaron a mi hija a los 2 años de vida. Y fundé...
Sorry. Well, my name is Liliana Thierry. I'm the founder and director of the Association for the Care of Diabetes in Argentina. And I am here because my daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at age 2. Sí, Lili.
Y bueno, a partir de allí fundé esta organización. Trabajamos, nuestra misión es minimizar el impacto de la diabetes en la vida de las personas. Trabajamos en programas de educación dirigidas a niños, a adultos, pero también a su entorno escolar y social.
From that moment of the diagnosis, I decided to create this association, Cuidar, and we work really hard to minimize and reduce the impact of diabetes in the life of people living with this condition. We have several programs, educational activities and programs, and also to empower people living with diabetes.
En Argentina, si bien contamos con una ley que garantiza a las personas con diabetes todos sus insumos y medicamentos, lamentablemente no se cumple, por lo cual trabajamos en áreas fuertemente de acceso y particularmente en incidencia en políticas públicas.
Although there is a law in Argentina that to guarantee the access to healthcare and supplies to people living with diabetes, this law is not always taken into account. So we work really hard to make advocacy and to have incidence in public policies so as to guarantee the access to healthcare and all the supplies people living with diabetes need, such as insulin, test stripes, and other supplies.
Y básicamente nuestra mayor preocupación y nuestro mayor, para terminar, nuestra fuerte trabajo es poder motivar y empoderar a las personas que viven con diabetes para que ellas puedan incidir en políticas públicas. Por eso estoy muy agradecida, es un honor para mí poder estar trabajando con todos ustedes y luego les cedo la palabra a Ratna.
Okay, so as to finish, we have a very important work and hard work in order to motivate and empower to people living with diabetes and people living with NCDs, motivate them and empower them so as they also can become actors to have incidence in the public policies that affect their lives and their quality of life. So, well, I'm very pleased to be able to work with all of you here in this group, and it's an honor for me, and I'm very motivated to make a great effort to reach our goal. So I go now to Ratna.
Thank you, Liliana. And hello, everyone. I'm Ratna. I'm based in New Delhi, India. I run an organization called Dakshayani and Amravati Health and Education, shortly called Dakshima Health, and it's a cross-disease patient alliance. But we also focus on non-communicable diseases, and our focus is with patients that are not really listed as the big five. So we work with Parkinson's groups, we work with stroke groups, with chronic kidney disease, long-term dermatological conditions and autoimmune conditions that are not really there in the horizon as far as the NCD language is concerned. We also work with other neurological conditions like epilepsy groups and a little bit of work in mental health. We've just started that. Because we've discovered that all these patients, whether it's psoriasis or Parkinson's or stroke, all of them need mental health support. But in the context of my country, mental health is not really integrated into the treatment plans of these patients. So that is where we work. I'm also the founding member of the Healthy India Alliance, which is the National NCD Alliance in India. So I was part of the earlier steering committee, and we had a good time working together with some of the very, very familiar faces here. So I'm very pleased that I am back in the same illustrious cloud, and I hope that I will be able to contribute to my best. And I am really, really excited to be part of this group. This initiative is really going to open up a lot of opportunities for many, many more patient voices to come to the front, because there are a lot of good work, I mean, innovations and good work being done in small groups, in tiny corners of big countries. And I see that happening in the context of my country as well, where people are really coming up with innovative solutions because the health systems or the governments are not really supporting them. So they themselves develop methods of rehabilitation or methods of, managing their condition where the social support is not there. And I think those kind of innovations need to be highlighted. So this platform is really, really very important. And I'm glad that WHO and NCD Alliance has started this. So that's it from me. And I would now like to hand over to Chantal, my good friend.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Ratna. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm going to try and put on my video. I'm visiting family, and my niece might be running in the background. So if you if you don't mind, don't mind. I am based in Durban in South Africa, but currently I'm visiting the northern parts, which is Polokwane, and it's excruciatingly hot. And there is also a swimming pool in the background. I'm sorry, I had to mention that. Anyway, so I'm Chantal Boyson, and my background is really in mental health advocacy. And that's kind of where I found my advocacy voice, is through my own experience with mental health and my family's experience with mental health. And a big part of that was developing the initiative called My Mind, Our Humanity, which was its dissemination initiative from the Lancet Commission on Global Mental Health. And we were, I'm not a young leader anymore, but I used to be a young leader that kind of focused on creating a way to communicate some of these messages in the global mental health report, in the Lancet report, to young people in a more way that is more understandable and for them to relate to it. And since then, many things have happened. I also work very closely with a local organization called the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, where I co-develop interventions, especially with youth mental health and young people, with high school students and university students. And a big focus of mine is really young people and developing leadership skills in lived experience and leadership skills in mental health, and really instilling that sense of power with the voice and power of people's experience. So I currently work independently, and I work with a variety of different organizations, and I'm on different steering committees and different boards. A big chunk of my work at the moment is through UNICEF. So I work very closely with UNICEF in New York and their AstraZeneca program, which focuses exactly on that. And it's creating young leaders in NCDs and creating content for young people to relate to some of the risk factors to NCDs and how to communicate with them on a more broader scale and for them to understand what are some of these risk factors. So I'm very excited about that work, and I'm also excited to bring some of those experiences to this work. And I'm really honored to be in the steering committee, and I think there's some amazing brains here to collectively run something quite successful. So I'm excited to be there. Thank you for having me. And I will then hand over to my very good friend, Joe. It's so nice to see your face. Next up.
Thank you so much, Chantal. Just like you, I'm not at home, so I hope that you can hear me well and good. My name is Joab Wako, and I am based in Kenya, in Nairobi, Kenya. I'm not in Nairobi right now, but I'm based in Kenya. I am a kidney transplant recipient. I've been living with a kidney transplant for 4 years, 25 this year. And my story starts with the advocacy agenda. So thank you, Wanjusha and team, the NCD Alliance. I came on board working on the national advocacy agenda here in Kenya. Really loved the concept, fell in love with it, and started running with it with the local chapter of the NCD Alliance. We then formed People Living with NCDs chapter, caucus, that is still very active. We were active throughout COVID, and we're able to help some people here and there. So I've been honored to just get people together who I've never get to know, because I was just a patient who didn't know what to do. And then the agenda came and I was able to connect and meet this amazing team of people here and outside of here, of course. But other than working, I work part-time at the NCD Alliance here in Kenya. I work on the social media, and I formed my own organization called Transplant Education Kenya. We deal with raising awareness on organ donation locally, because when I came back from India, I had my transplant in India, actually in Gurgaon. I found that there was very little advocacy around organ donation and very little awareness. So I decided to form Transplant Education Kenya just to raise that awareness, get people to know about how life-saving an organ transplant is, whether it's a kidney, liver, even a heart. So that's what I do. I'm very honored to be part of this steering committee. This is such a great honor for me, and I'm ready to see how I can plug in. So I'm going to call my good friend Michael. You're up next.
Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Michael Uchuno, a stroke survivor, diabetes, aphasia, and the founder of Michael and Francisca Foundation. I am a Nigerian. When I had my stroke, I realized that there was nothing like a stroke support group. But I know that my recovery would have been easier if I had been connected with such a group. This tends to be so in low and middle income countries. Given this opportunity to be part of this lineage team, I will do my possible best and knowledge, for I believe that it is a moment for me to contribute something really meaningful and important to the society. And my best opportunity is to be on the same table with you, so that I can likewise learn new ideas. I would like to thank the OVOV, for I've learned a lot from them. Majusha, thank you. Thank you, thank you, and thank you. Thank you. I don't know if there's anybody left.
We do have a few, Michael. Would you like me to call somebody out, if that's all right, without intending to put anybody in the spot?
Dr. Atimedis.
Dr. Shanti Mendes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm a physician by training. Currently, I'm based in Geneva, and I'm a founder member of the Geneva Learning Foundation, a foundation dedicated to capacity strengthening in developing countries. And in the first 20 years of my career, I was in clinical practice in different countries, and also was training undergraduates and postgraduates in medical schools. And then in late 1990s, I joined the WHO and was based in Geneva for nearly 20 years. And I left WHO a couple of years ago. And in WHO, I was working on NCDs all of my time. So I'm really pleased to see this extremely needed and well-timed initiative and would like to congratulate Guy, Jack and the team, and also the NCD Alliance, and would like to I look forward to working with this amazing group on the initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shanti. I guess in the interest of time, perhaps I could call out the last few remaining. Kate, if I could invite you to introduce yourself, please.
I'll go first since I'm the first Kate there. My name's Kate Armstrong. I'm based in Sydney, Australia, and I work as a public health physician here in Australia with the Aboriginal Community Controlled Health Service sector. And I guess more to the point though, I'm the mother of a young person now, a 22-year-old with a chronic health condition. And I think my experience learning about the lives of children with the same condition in other countries around the Asia Pacific region gave me a real passion for equity and the power of support groups, and have since been involved in support groups for children with a range of different NCDs across the Asia Pacific and other countries. I'm interested, Joab, to hear about your transplant. I recently did my doctorate of public health on nephrotic syndrome in Vietnam, and there's a lot of end-stage kidney disease and a lot of work that needs to happen there. So congratulations on your great work. Yeah, thank you for this opportunity, and I'll just throw it to the other Kate. Thank you.
So Kate Swaffer, the other Kate, isn't here with us today. It's quite late in the day for her because she's based in Australia. If I could pass over to Patrick.
Hello, everyone. Lovely to meet you all and put faces to names. My background is clinical predominantly. I'm an advanced nurse practitioner for neurology with the subspecialty in movement disorders. So the vast majority of my working life is Parkinson's related and all the Parkinsonisms, but also all the comorbidities that go with the aging process, as it's predominantly older people. And I've been involved in the European steering group for Parkinson's disease. As my academic side of things, I'm an adjunct lecturer in nursing, and I also lecture to the medical students, postgraduate and undergraduate. But nationally, then I'm involved as well in the clinical programs for neurology. But it's very heartening to see people here with an interest in transplant as well, because that's my personal side of it, is advocacy for transplant services. I was lucky enough to be able to be a living donor for my daughter a year and a half ago for a liver transplant. And so she's 6 now, so she's doing great. And that's an area that I would really like to see push forward as well, because our transplant services, albeit in Ireland, where I'm based, albeit what's available is very good, all children's liver surgery and liver transplants, they all have to go to the UK from Ireland, because we don't have the numbers or the expertise for the surgery here. But adult liver is done in Ireland. So I'm really looking forward to working with you all, and I think there'll be many great things ahead between service developments and product developments, hopefully, and new knowledge coming from everybody. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Patrick. And I guess finally, Vivian, over to you.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, Vivian, we can hear you.
Okay, I won't switch on my video because my internet connection is not stable. But otherwise, I am based in Kampala in Uganda, and I've been working in the cancer space for 3 years now. I work for the Clinton Health Access Initiative, whose mission is reducing the burden of disease in LMICs by working with government and the private sector to create and improve systems that deliver care to patients. The cancer program started in 2015 in Chai, but historically we had been more focused on infectious diseases. So what I do specifically is I negotiate with multinational manufacturers for medical devices and diagnostics to lower the prices of those health commodities, and specifically quality assured health commodities. And at the same time, and I also provide technical assistance to about 15 governments in Africa on how they can improve their systems in order to be able to access these health commodities. Why I am part of this, why I applied to this is because one, my father died of cancer, and I have two aunties, and more recently, a first cousin who passed away from cancer. And so it's seemingly looking like it runs in the family. And so I'm passionate about finding solutions to this tremendously debilitating disease and truly expensive disease to manage. I'm also passionate about innovation, and previously I used to work in the HIV space, and I saw what innovation has done for HIV infected patients, and I would like to see that done and extrapolated to NCD patients, and more specifically, I guess, cancer patients. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Vivian. I think one is almost left speechless with the wealth of experience and expertise of this particular group, and also the enthusiasm to contribute is palpable. So really, really grateful for that. And thanks, Jack, for just putting together this slide, which gives a sense of the group dynamic and the group composition, so to say. And it's great to see that a large portion of the group are women leaders, and there's so much obviously to learn from all the expertise that you bring to the table. It's fantastic to see that a majority of those who are represented here on this group belong to civil society, working with NGOs. It's fantastic. Kate, looking forward to all your expertise and insights, particularly with the Aboriginal community, looking at groups that have not currently been mainstream, but definitely need to going forward and must be. Also, everybody here has a lived experience to share, and I'm sure that that's the statistics there of over half the group having lived experience. I think it's a little more than that. Having heard your introductions, everybody either has a personal experience or knows somebody in the family, a relative or friend. I think we all have learned to grapple with the realities of living with NCDs. It's fantastic to see that a majority of us here are focused and passionate about working in low and middle income countries, representing experiences from low and middle income countries. And of course, we wouldn't be here if we weren't committed to meaningful involvement of people living with NCDs and wanting to amplify voices and the expertise of people living with NCDs. So it's fantastic to see this group here, and thank you so much for joining. Next slide, please, Jack. And just before I hand over to Jack, I wanted to sort of walk us through some of the roles and responsibilities anticipated, from the co-chair, us as NCD Alliance, as well as the steering group in itself. In terms of the co-chair, and just to give you a bit of background of our involvement with the NCD Lab, as Guy pointed out, we've been working very closely, my colleague, Dr. Christina Parsons-Perez, who's Capacity Development Director at the NCD Alliance, and we've been working very closely with Guy and Jack and the team, the secretariat at GCM, to really think through the vision and sort of convening rationale for an NCD lab such as this. And we're delighted that it's finally launching. But as a predecessor to the lab, we also had communities, various thematic communities, and one of those was on meaningful involvement of people living with NCDs, which also was previously mentioned here. And Ratna, I think, pointed out that she's been a member of the previous community. And there as well, we were looking at really dynamic discussions around the value of meaningful involvement of people living with NCDs. And it's great to see that in recognition of the success of that community, we've sort of transitioned or evolved into this NCD lab where we can be more action-oriented, solutions-focused, and really driving innovation. So in terms of our role as co-chair, we've been identified and appointed by GCM for a period of 2 years based on our ongoing sort of learning. I won't say expertise as yet. I think we're all learning what meaningful involvement is all about and how we can walk the talk on it. But really, given our commitment to it, I suppose we've been identified, to co-chair this particular NCD lab, and we will be supporting GCM and sort of leading and moderating discussions of this expert group here, and sort of helping to summarize the discussions, crystallize those discussions as well. And also, of course, really looking forward to supporting the steering group in identifying themes and directions for future cycles of the NCD lab that Jack and Guy will present on further. In terms of the steering group itself, as I was saying, it's hugely encouraging to see the wealth of experience and expertise that this group brings together. Again, the group has been appointed for a period of 2 years and will really look to provide strategic focus to the working of the NCD lab and the cycles, as will be explained in a few minutes. And of course, once those submissions and project ideas start to come in, the steering group will be hugely involved in leading and providing feedback on the type of project ideas coming in, and the steering group, we're sort of relying on your support to act as ambassadors for the lab and really spread the word and encourage more community members, people living with NCDs, and organizations or individuals affiliated to organizations that are committed to meaningful involvement to apply and express their interest in the NCD Lab's work going forward. So with that, I guess I'll really looking forward to our interactions over the next 2 years, and I'll pass over to Jack for the next bit of the session.
Super, thank you so much, Manjusha. I really appreciate the overview and echo the excitement and both the variety and dedication and passion from all the steering group members and of course our co-chair. I'm just very conscious of time, and I hope everyone can join us a little bit after 3 o'clock. We're hoping to maybe conclude today's session about 3:15, so 15 minutes later than we had scheduled. So I hope you can all make it. If you can't, don't worry, we are recording the session and we will share the slides afterwards. However, I'm going to try and summarize the next 5 slides or so in approximately about 7 minutes. So that would hopefully give us about 15 minutes for discussion and give you the opportunity to ask any questions and for us to provide those answers to anything which comes up so far or the next couple of slides. So as Manjusha was mentioning, we both the co-chairs and the steering group members are appointed for a 2-year period. There is a possibility to extend that after 2 years. But within this first 2 years, there's going to be 4 cycles. And the first cycle is going to be launching next Thursday. And between the 25th of February and the 8th of April, this is where we're going to open up the labs for submissions. And I'll talk a little bit about what types of submissions we could expect within that first cycle. But given that we have a relatively short period of time, and this is a new initiative, we are suggesting to all the different thematic areas to have a broad focus within the first cycle. Now that gives us 2 main advantages. One, we get to see this new initiative in action, and we get to see the interest from the respective NCD community and more broader global health community within the respective thematic areas. So we'll get to see what submissions are being entered into the labs. But also we can use this time in the first cycle to have a follow-up meeting. That's what we hope for the second steering group meeting to really tap into your insights and expertise to what you think the future cycles should focus on. And this is where we get to really tap into your knowledge and expertise, and really maybe go down to identify what are the pain points, where are the areas that we can really focus in for future cycles. And that's really, you know, we have the opportunity to focus purely on the second cycle, or potentially all the future cycles. But really, we want to give that participatory process with you to further scope out what the focus should be for the second, third, and fourth cycle. So I hope that gives a bit of scope in terms of the process going forward, at least for the first cycle. And here's just a couple of key dates. And we sent through an overview document prior to the meeting, and we'll send this again after the meeting. And there's a couple of key dates in there. And I've already mentioned some of them in terms of the launch, which you'll see as being next week. We'll then review the secretariat, will then do a review of all the submissions through the labs. We'll then provide you with yourselves as the steering group members and the co-chairs with a short list of submissions. There'll be about 10 to 20. Now, we have developed a review criteria, which you can find in the terms of reference. This review criteria we will also look at in the second steering group meeting, where we can see if there's any modifications that are required prior to the first cycle completing. So just for full transparency, this will be the same review criteria which the secretariat and the steering group members will use together. This will also be published on the WHO website, linked to the labs. And then we hope to then select a winner from the respective cycle at the end of April, and then announce those before the World Health Assembly in May. And obviously you can see in the bottom line of those dates in blue, the dates for the second and fourth cycle, and the reds will be the first and third cycle. There we go. One very important part I should mention and should not forget is the evaluation of the labs. Now, this is the first time that we are doing this new initiative, so we're very keen to hear your feedback. And there might be some kinks that we need to iron out after the first cycle. So we're very much open to hearing your feedback on what works, what can be improved, and how we can really utilize this platform going forward. So in terms of types of proposals, now, again, this is taken from the terms of reference, and you can see a huge variety of different types of potential submissions through the labs. You know, they really span from research to advocacy to community-based interventions, digital health interventions, policy activities, health literacy, behavioral science, healthcare products, a very broad scope. And again, there is flexibility here to adjust this for future cycles. And again, this comes back into that second steering group meeting where we'll have an idea of what the appetite is, but also tap into your insights. But really, this is, as you can see here, this is a list of types of submissions, but it's definitely not limited to. So we can add and adapt as we go forward. So the submissions for each of the cycles will be facilitated from an online form. I've already talked about a little bit about the process in terms of the secretariat developing the shortlist. We then present that to yourselves, and I'll talk a little bit about the review criteria. But ultimately, the steering group will provide that feedback and recommendations on the winner. But ultimately, WHO is responsible for the review of all submissions and the selection of the winner. But we want to emphasize that this is a participatory process and a joint effort for the whole initiative. And again, to underscore the importance of the governance of the whole initiative, we'll be making the selection criteria and the shortlist of submissions available on the WHO website and the WHO Knowledge Action Portal, to be more specific. So looking ahead to next Thursday, I'm going to ask and introduce my colleague Mahim Abdallah, who's a consultant working with us in the GCM, to talk a little bit about the communications package, which will be landing in your inboxes early next week. Mahim, over to you.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, I'm just going to make it really quick. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate the wide diverse of stakeholders, people enjoying, participants. I'm very amazed at the group we have today. Just a little about the launch is next Thursday. And I'll be sending out the communication package with me and Jack and Guy towards you guys, and it will include key messages in which you guys disseminate in your individual organizational networks, social media assets, newsletter texts, and FAQs, just so you can send out the word and we can have a great submission of applications proposals. Regarding next steps, what the secretary will be looking at, reviewing overview documentation ahead of the launch. We will also support the first cycle launch by utilizing the communication package that you guys will have. Also, we're able to participate in a second SG meeting focusing on the strategic vision on the future cycles. And we'll be responding to information requests on the development of the labs on the webpage on May 2021. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll pass it back to Jack. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahim. And just to underscore that review of the overview documentation, that's referring to the 3-page overview document that we sent before the call, and again we'll send after the call. If there's any suggested tweaks that you want to see there, both in terms of your individual titles and affiliations, but also maybe on the description and also some of that proposed submission types and review criteria, then we're happy to receive that, preferably by Monday close of business if possible. He mentioned the communications package. We talked about the second steering group meeting, but also just to underscore as well that we really want to highlight your very valuable role within this initiative. So we will be developing that web page in the coming weeks. So please respond to our request to send us your best picture and your fantastic biographies when we develop that. Okay, so I'm 1 minute past the hour, which is not too bad. I think that's 8 minutes for the 7 slides or so. So now I have the pleasure of passing back to Guy and Manjusha to hopefully spend the next 30 minutes in a discussion. Guy, Manjusha, back to you.
Thanks, Jack. Let's move on, Manjusha. I think many are probably very anxious to provide some comments, questions, and direction, and very welcome to you to do so. So I think the first, I have a few elements I want to add, but I'll leave that for the end if we have time. First, I have to prioritize the great expert minds we have here on the call to provide any comments or suggestions. You agree, Manjusha?
Absolutely, Guy. Absolutely.
Great. So please, questions, concerns, clarifications, next steps, anything.
Vivian has her hand up. Yes, Vivian, over to you.
Thanks. I'm wondering, in our dissemination in our networks, are you looking for particular kinds of organizations, and what kind of support will be given to these projects? Actually, those are 2 questions.
Two questions, 2 very, very important questions. If Manjusha, maybe I can start with this question.
Absolutely.
While we get others warmed up. And these are very important questions. The submissions, basically how it's structured within WHO's policies and procedures, is this a submission should come in from individuals. And that is important in a sense. The individuals, certainly all individuals will be part of broader organization systems or platforms, but the submission, and that's absolutely adequate, but the submissions themselves have to be individual and from a person. So while we're not necessarily supporting in organizations and entities through the selection process and winners, we will be supporting the individuals that are leading on those initiatives. And certainly they will have, bringing with them, they will have that support of their own organizations, but we will be identifying individuals here. Your other question was on the expected support for the applicants and the winners in particular. And this is a comment I wanted to make. Now I'll make it now, actually. This initiative is basically an innovation incubator. And the backbone of that is the cycles, as Jack has explained. The backbone is each and every cycle that can build, the successive cycles can build on the previous cycles, or they can be the 4 individual standalone cycles. But if we take a zoom out, a bit of zoom out on from the individual cycle, we take a little zoom out and we look at what this would look like at the end of the 2-year period where the 4 cycles have completed. We have, at least in this thematic area, we would have 4 winners. We also look at the other 2 thematic areas we have launched in their own particular 2-year and 4 cycles. We have then 12, around 12 or so winners for this. So we have a portfolio of very interesting, filtered, supported, enhanced projects at the end of the day, at the end of the 2 years. But we also have, through this call for applications, we have a very interesting mapping of what's happening in the ecosystems, in particular what's happening on the ground in the community and community-led platforms, grassroots organizations, research, smaller research institutions, etc. We will have a very interesting mapping that we can then build on, understanding what are the pain points, what are the gaps, what are the opportunities to identify innovations and where innovations are popping up. And that will help us and help the team then structure successive calls, structure interactions with the other thematic areas. For example, we do foresee that the thematic area on people living with NCDs will certainly have intersections and maybe have at some moment when we could even develop a co-organized call with the lab on women and girls and or the lab on next generation or youth. So there's a lot of interaction while this is happening, while we're doing the backbone work of the cycles. There's a lot of intrinsic activity that we will then take to your steering group meetings. We can discuss these gaps, these opportunities, the highlighted, and certainly understand how we're going to support the winners. And that was to your question, Vivian. The whole network, WHO's broad network within the HQ, but also at regional and country offices, will be supporting the successive stages that the winners may require after the announcement. We will connect with all the networks necessary. We will identify possible next phases, even with your help, understanding how these winners, or in the process to becoming winners, how their project proposals can be enhanced, tweaked, and further revised to ensure that they will have the impact and address the gaps that it was the intentional vision. So there will be a lot of support from WHO and sort of understanding what sort of support is needed for the winners afterwards. But then we will also count on the networks, your own networks, to understand even financing options for possible funds, possible winners, but also interaction with implementing partners, interaction with research agencies, which can take and further enhance these projects, etc. So I think there's a lot of networking and connection we will do. We are not necessarily a funding facility. We're not creating expectations that these projects will be funded by WHO or members of the steering committee, but it is an interesting analysis to do. Then how can we connect the dots through our networks to any of these, including financing options going forward, but providing those connections rather than providing the needed and immediate resources. I hope I'm clear about that. There may be some questions further on that, but I wanted to make that point that may clarify a bit further, sort of not only the day-to-day activity, but then the overall sort of strategic thinking we can have around what's coming in, the mapping, and the innovations that we are selecting collectively. Manjusha, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Thanks, Guy. I know that Jack wanted to comment on the point about process, and I see a few hands raised, so we can take the questions and then respond together.
Great.
Jack?
Yeah, just very quickly, because I'm not sure if we touched upon this right at the start, but the global coordination mechanism on NCDs is also made up of 450 participants, of which 250 odd are non-state actors. So within those respective participants, they all have a range of different extensive networks in different areas of the NCD agenda. So this communications package will also be for the steering group, but also for the wider network, and also complementing what Guy mentioned in terms of those internal networks. I'll stop here.
Thanks, Jack. I'll pass over to Shanti. I can see quite a few hands raised now. Great to see the curiosity. Shanti, over to you.
Yes, thank you.
Sir.
2 quick questions. The duration of the projects, are you going to limit them to 2 years, or can they be longer? Will you be specifying that? And the second question, are you targeting only the English-speaking communities? Thank you.
Manjusha, I suggest maybe we take all the questions to see the ones that the hands are up to see if we can connect them.
Sure. Chantel, over to you.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I need to leave pretty soon. I just wanted to ask, I think you've covered quite a lot of it, and thank you for the insight. I think my question was related to the funding and financial component and who the main funder is, because that would also then also drive the whether there's some conflict of interest. So I'm guessing it's just understanding where the conflict of interest might be, and also where that lies with everyone in the room, just so that we are clear about what that conflict of interest might potentially be. And then I think the other question was just in terms of a bit more practical question, was just in terms of our nomination as steering committees. Would that be a public nomination that will be appointed would sit on a WHO website, or will there be some sort of announcement, just so I suppose it just kind of like solidifies our role so that we can refer back to that if we do get queries or questions. So it's a bit more of a pragmatic question, if you may. Thank you.
Thanks, Chantal. Guy, I'll just take one other question and we can come to this together. Kaisha, I thought I saw your hand raised.
No, my questions have been asked. I was just curious to hear if this information is going to be in the call for submissions, because otherwise, similar to Chantal, I mean, I think we'll get a lot of questions, and I just want to know the process for what information goes out.
Guy, did you want to take that first?
Okay, yeah, they're all very excellent questions. Maybe to ease sort of overall questions, this is going to be a very transparent process. So in the call for submissions, we will have very clear all of these elements that you've mentioned are being clearly addressed in the terms of reference. We hope clearly addressed in the terms of reference, but they are there, and this will be shared. There'll be criteria for submissions. So what sort of elements we're expecting from the applicants, but also there'll be very clarity on the criteria for selections. And the terms of reference do state some of these elements that we've been mentioning. Maybe Jack, we've been discussing a lot of the conflict of interest, and you've been having a lot of attention to that, and also the visibility, obviously, of our steering group members. You want to take that?
No, for sure. So, all steering group members have to go through the screening process, which aligns with the framework for engaging non-state actors, which is WHO's conflict of interest policy, if you like, for those who are not familiar. And yes, that procedure has been a transparent procedure, and those who have passed that process are now invited to join this stage. But we will definitely publish the names of those individuals who are the steering group members for the different thematic areas. And also, to answer Chantal, for those submissions that we're expecting, they also have to submit the same information upon submission. So that's also particularly important to ensure that there's no conflict of interest right from the start in terms of when we're reviewing those. So it's not the next stage when we're shortlisting. It's right from the start. And that was one of the reasons why we had an extensive consultation with our legal team to ensure that this new initiative fully aligns with those that internal framework of FENSA. Over.
Hey, Manjusha, I want to address a question from Shanti, because I think I'm sensing a need to clarify the length of the project. I think that's a very good question. And I think with the other questions, I'm sensing that there may be a belief that we will be taking projects from start to finish in each cycle. And that's not necessarily the case. What we are doing here, we're harvesting innovative projects that are happening on the ground, wherever we can reach those grounds. And we will be trying to identify those projects which we think, with the steering group, that's the we think all, that have the potential for impact and the potential to address a particular gap in the agenda for people living with We will not be developing those projects. Those projects, in the terms of reference and the criteria for submission of applications, it's very clear these projects have already started, have at some level of phase of development. There may be initial phases, or there may be all final phases. In a sense, these projects have some sort of theory, a hypothesis, some sort of a planning process, some sort of stages of development. That's one of the criteria. There cannot be ideations, and we with the steering group will be looking at how we can, in some cases, when we think that they're of high value, we can sort of provide recommendations to enhance the project proposal and to enhance the design and development of the project plan. And until we can promote it as the winner in this case, and then the project is full support from WHO and the steering committee, and then we announce the winner. This is one of our innovative approaches going forward for the agenda on people living with, and we make visible. We have high level visibility in WHO through our regional office and country office, through your networks, and then we can start supporting as the process from our end finishes there when we announce the winner. But what I was saying is that through the network, through a very rich network we have, we then can identify how we can connect the dots with our networks, with possible funders, possible researchers, to take those, to support those winners into next phases of development, or hopefully a phase of implementation. But that is external to the cycle itself. That's external to the steering committee's roles and responsibilities. That's just an additional support we will provide with our networks. I'm clarifying that very, very importantly. Manjusha, maybe you want to add anything to that?
Thanks, Guy. No, I think that's very important to have clarified. There was one question earlier on, and I can see Patrick's hand raised as well, on the remit of the cycle. Do we go beyond English-speaking communities? And I think that's a very relevant question.
Jack, I'll also give that to you, because that's.
Yes, in terms of the external communication, for the first cycle, it will only be in English. And the submission process will be a requirement to submit in English as well. But we hope for the second and third and fourth cycle, or future cycles, I could say, that we could integrate the submission form and also the communications materials into the 5 other UN languages.
And sorry, Patrick, but maybe Jack, before we go to Patrick, Michael's asking about the age also. You can take that one.
Yeah.
I can't remember the age off the top of my head, but I would imagine that those submissions have to be from those above the ages of 18 years and above, but I would have to double check that.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jack. I mean, given that we also have a thematic focus on the next generation and NCD, so probably the 18-year limit here sounds roundabout correct. Patrick, over to you, and then Ratna. Patrick, I think your microphone is on mute.
No,
yeah,
it's working there now. Thank you. Just wondering, as regards, because it's one of the questions that will be asked. So if a person was to win, aside from the support and recognition and public accolades that will be received, is there a tangible physical reward as well?
Maybe let's take Ratna, just in case there's some synergies with Ratna's question, we can address that too.
Yeah, thank you. And I was just going to build on the question about languages, because many of our chronic disease patients have disabilities as well. And I'm assuming that all applications will be digital. So what kind of support will be provided to, say, a stroke survivor who cannot type on a keypad and may have an innovation to submit, or a mental health survivor who has an innovation and who might need support to fill in an application? So is there something in the process that is built to assist these people?
Interesting. And quickly, Kasia, I don't want to leave anyone out for the answer. So Kasia, maybe we can incorporate your question.
No, I was just curious to hear you mentioned in the list, it could be health products and services. And I think just in relation to that, have you discussed what this is a strange question, but the level of commercialism? I mean, how commercial can these initiatives be for it to be considered?
Okay, maybe Manjusha, I'll take a few initial comments and then over to you.
Thanks.
the funding and Patrick, no, it was Patrick. What sort of material, and I'm sure we're referring to the funds and financing, the financial support. This is a WHO initiative, and as such, WHO is not a financing institution, and we cannot promote ourselves as a financing facility. And this lab initiative, while we are catalyzing and supporting and enhancing innovation and sort of mapping and stock taking innovation, we do so with the expectation of building an innovative platform and approaches that can be disseminated and scaled at different levels. And that is our aim. We are an innovation incubator, and actually we are taking the benchmarking of this sort of initiative from other very high level WHO initiatives, which are being developed through the WHO's Innovation Hub, which is a broad organization-wide innovation hub for different programmatic areas. And that has been recently launched under the DG Tedros leadership, and it has some benchmarking on this, and definitely funding is not part of WHO's or expectations for these. And this is very clear in terms of reference, and this is where we want to be very clear. But also we have a very interesting network with you, but even beyond the GCM and some of our regional partners, where we can then connect the dots, but we can't create that expectations, or we can't promise that very clearly. We can sort of support in connecting those dots when we look at that portfolio of innovative submissions we start collecting at the end of the 2-year cycle. That'll be very interesting portfolio and platform to offer to some of our donor partners, to some of our regional partners who are looking for interesting, innovative approaches to scale. But we cannot promise that will happen. We just connect those dots, and through the visibility of WHO, through WHO's platforms and through yours, we can enhance those connections. I hope I'm clear. There's some very clear sort of red lines there that I want to underscore. But also, I don't want to undermine the value and the opportunities that these applicants will really have. Very huge opportunities to leverage these platforms and to leverage your expertise in shaping their submission and their application. The applications, and then sort of shaping with final sort of recommendations, and then sort of more than recommendations, sort of guidance, the application itself, the winning application itself. There'll be opportunity to do so too.
Guys, sorry to interrupt, but there was a question from Bruno that probably relates to this a little bit and might be help. Might help being clarified, which is these applicants, are they individuals, or do they need to be affiliated to formal organizations?
That's a good one, and I touched on it briefly, but Jack, why don't you take that one? And also about the what sort of platforms what sort of opportunities we have for those who may have sort of problems in being able to apply or to meet the criteria that we're asking for. And then maybe, sorry, just to touch on Kaja's question, touch on that, on the possibility to tweak and to refine the criteria in some of these areas, for example, on health products, and how we can, the opportunity to do so will come.
No, yeah, for sure. So in terms of the possibility of tweaking and refining the focus of both the submission criteria, the review criteria, and the focus for future cycles, that is possible. If there is any immediate reflections on the overview documents, we would very much welcome you to send that by the end of Monday, so we can try to implement that for the first cycle. To stress, those submissions for the labs must come from individuals. So the submissions can't be on behalf of an entity. It must be an individual submitting on their individual basis. And that again is fully aligning with the framework for engaging of non-state actors. So I hope that kind of clarifies the commercial aspect or any commercial commercial sensitivities linked to submissions. And accessibility, I think, is incredibly important. And I think we should definitely include that in future cycles. I think given the time span that we have in terms of the launch next week, we may not be able to incorporate that into the submission form for the first cycle. But I think that alongside the language translations to the other 5 UN languages should definitely be prioritized for future cycles. So we've definitely noted that, and we'll explore what the options are within the different platforms. Over.
Thanks, Jack. Guy, Jack, I'm just conscious that we are well over time, but lots of hands raised again. And given that it's the first meeting, if everyone's all right, it'll be good to give everyone a chance, the remaining few a chance to ask their questions, if that's all
I'm sorry,
right.
just to interject. Unfortunately, we actually have another steering group meeting starting
Immediately after, is it in 5 minutes? Perhaps we can... All right, that's fine. I guess we take just one final question and then follow up by email, if that's all right. I can see Kate's hands raised for quite a while now. I'll just allow her the floor for a very quick few seconds.
Thank you. Just 3 quick comments. First one would be just culturally, First Nations and also in the Asia region, individualism, you know, is not always something that people feel really comfortable with. They often feel like being part of a collective. So I just raised that for consideration. The other thinking was around the number of winners. I think it's so exciting that you're drawing on, you're identifying innovations, and I think it's reasonable to expect that there'll be more than one innovation. I'm sure you've got that in mind, but just thinking about how we can make sure we really capture everything that we learn from everything we see, and think about perhaps a range of ways of sharing strengths and successes and celebrating a range of innovations, not just one winner. And I think the last comment is just around conflict of interest, and just how do we as members of the steering group announce our conflict of interest. We can share it with our group, but then when we're discussing the winners and that sort of thing, it's just how do we absent ourselves, for example, if there's a group that we're working with that might be under consideration. So they're just a few thoughts to think about. Thank you.
Just mindful, Jack, Guy, that you have another call immediately. I mean, really thought-provoking questions. Kate, maybe we can reflect on those and come back over email, and definitely keep some space specifically for that on the next call of the steering group. Would that be all right? Great. Jack, Guy, over to you for closing. I know it has to be a quick one from your side.
It's a quick one. It's so exciting, and to see that, to the excitement and the passion already created. I think all of you, this is exactly what we need. We need your guidance, your suggestions, and how we can further enhance and make sure that what's coming out, as Kate says, what's coming out of these calls and at the end of the cycle is really impactful, and we can have some analysis, mapping, data collection, and sort of a platform of innovation. Basically, that's what we need at the end. So I think that you will guide that whole process, and happy to see such great steering group members. So thanks so much. And we will send all this information to you, and already send a proposal for the next call. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much for joining.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Have a great weekend.